What if I told you that life can change in the blink of an eye? That the very moment you think you've lost everything could be the moment that unlocks your destiny. This is the story of Zandile, a girl who had nothing, abandoned, betrayed, left in the cold, with no one to turn to. But what she didn't know was that the night she lost everything was the night that changed her life forever. The night was cruel. A raging storm swept through the Johannesburg street, washing away the sins of the city. But in the dark alleys, in the hidden corners, some sins never washed away. Zandile stood outside the house she once called home, her body trembling. The cold rain seeped through her torn clothes, but the shiver that ran through her bones wasn't just from the weather. It was the weight of betrayal, the sting of rejection, the finality of knowing she had no one. She banged on the wooden door. Her knuckles turned raw. "Mama, please open the door." Inside, there was only silence. Then, from behind the door, the voice that had haunted her since childhood sliced through the storm like a dagger. "You are nothing, Zandile. You will always be nothing. Get out of my sight." Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed her forehead against the door. Desperate, "I have nowhere to go. Please, Mama, just let me stay for the night." A sharp laugh. The door rattled as something heavy slammed against it. "Did you hear me? You useless girl. I said get out." And then the porch light flickered off. The world fell into pitch blackness. Zandile stumbled back, blinking against the rain. It wasn't just the house that rejected her. It was the entire world. She wrapped her arms around herself, taking a shaky step back onto the wet pavement. Her stomach twisted with hunger, her throat dry from screaming. She had nowhere to go. The street stretched before her, endless and unforgiving. She thought of all the things she could do. Should she sleep in a bus shelter? Should she find an alley and pray she didn't get robbed? Or worse? Tears burned her eyes. She had never felt so alone. But fate has a strange way of working. Because just as she thought she had lost everything, a car pulled up beside her, and inside was a man who would change her life forever. A sleek black Rolls Royce glided to a stop beside her. The tinted window slowly rolled down. Zandile's heart pounded. No one like her, a girl with nothing, had ever been this close to something so expensive, so powerful. A deep, smooth voice called out from inside, "Get in." Zandile froze. Inside the car, she could barely make out the shape of the man speaking to her. The dim city light illuminated the sharp outline of his suit, the strong angle of his jaw. Everything in her screamed to run. She had heard of men like this, the kind who took advantage of girls who had nowhere to go, the kind who offered hope only to steal their souls. She took a step back. I don't know you." The man leaned forward slightly. His face was unreadable, but his voice was calm, calculated. "You don't need to know me, but I know you, Zandile." Her stomach flipped. He knew her name. Every instinct told her to run. but her feet wouldn't move. The rain poured harder, soaking her skin, but she barely noticed. Who are you? The man exhaled slowly. Luthando Zwide. Her breath caught. Even she, a girl with no home, no money, no future, had heard that name before. Luthando Zwide, a billionaire, the man who owned half the city. What was he doing here? And why was he speaking to her? Get in the car, Zandile. You don't belong in the street. She stared at him, her mind racing. This had to be a trick. No one helped girls like her. But then she looked down at herself. Her arms were covered in bruises, her clothes ripped. She had nothing. Her stepmother's voice rang in her ears. You are nothing. You will always be nothing. She swallowed hard, and then she took a step forward. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. Okay. As she slid into the leather seat, the warmth of the car wrapped around her, and for the first time that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Who was he? And why was he looking for her? The silence inside the Rolls Royce was suffocating. Zandile sat stiffly, her soaked clothes taken to her body. The warmth of the car felt foreign, like she had stepped into another universe, one that wasn't meant for her. Her fingers dug onto her seat. Across from her, Luthando Zwide sat, watching her carefully. His tailored black suit was pristine, his expression unreadable. A billionaire, a man who could have been anywhere else in the world. Yet here he was, offering her something she couldn't quite understand. The car pulled onto the glowing street of Johannesburg, but Zandile could barely take in the sight. Her heartbeat was too loud. Why her? Why had a man worth billions stopped for a girl who had nothing? Zandile's voice shook when she finally spoke. Where are you taking me? Luthando's eyes didn't leave her face. Somewhere safe. The words should have eased her, but they didn't. She had learned long ago that safe was a lie. Her stepmother's voice echoed in her head. You are nothing. You will always be nothing. But now, here she was, in the presence of a man who owned half the city. Why? A man like Luthando Zwide didn't do things without a reason, and Zandile was about to learn that everything had a cost. Zandile's breath hitched. This was not a house. It was a fortress. A penthouse unlike anything she had ever seen. The car door opened, but Zandile didn't move. What do you want from me? Luthando smiled, a slow knowing smile. You think I want something, Zandile? She hated that he said her name so easily, like he had known her forever. People don't help others for free. Luthando's expression darkened, and suddenly the air inside the car felt colder. You are right. Zandile's stomach twisted as he placed it on her laps. The envelope. You want a way out of poverty? A way out of being nothing? Her fingers trembled as she picked up the envelope. Inside was a contract. 1 year, no excuses, no quitting, no running. But what exactly was she signing up for? Her heart pounded. What? What do I have to do? Luthando leaned closer. You work for me, you learn, you survive. Survive? Zandile's blood turned cold. Survive what? Luthando's smile returned, but this time it held something darker. Yourself. Zandile didn't know it yet, but this was more than a job. It was a test that would push her beyond her breaking point. The moment Zandile stepped into Luthando Zwide's penthouse, she felt it immediately. This was not a place for girls like her. Everything screamed wealth, power, strength. Zandile felt small. Luthando led her down a long, dark corridor, his footsteps silent against the marble. She tried to match his pace, but felt like a shadow trailing behind a storm. They stopped in front of a massive wooden door. This is where your training begins. Training? Zandile frowned. She thought this was a job, but now it sounded like something else. Luthando pushed the door open. A woman stood inside, waiting, tall, elegant, but her eyes were sharp, almost cruel. This was no ordinary woman. This was Kanduwe Radebe, a woman feared even in the highest circles of power. So, this is the girl. Luthando nodded once. Train her, break her if you have to, but she must survive. Survive? Zandile barely had time to process those words before the real test began. Rule 1. Never look weak. Zandile wiped the water from her face, stunned. What is this? Thanduwe stepped closer, towering over her. This is the only chance you have to prove you deserve to be here. She realized in that moment, no one was going to save her. She either fought or she failed. The next week was hell. Thanduwe was ruthless. She never smiled, never praised, never gave her a second to breathe. Faster, girl! If you can't handle this, leave! She wanted to quit. Her body screamed for rest. Her mind whispered that she would never survive this. But then she heard it again. Stepmother's voice echoing in her head. You are nothing. You will always be nothing. And something inside her snapped. She refused to be nothing. Again. Maybe you are not as weak as I thought. For the first time, Zandile had won a battle, but the war was far from over. One night, after another brutal training session, Zandile limped into her small room in the penthouse. Her muscles aching. Someone was inside her room. Who is there? The figure turned. It was Nomsa, her only friend, the only person who had ever shown her kindness. But that night, Zandile was about to learn that even kindness can be a lie. Nomsa's face was tense, unreadable. Listen to me. You have to leave now. What? Why? Nomsa looked around as if someone might be listening. Luthando, he's not who you think he is. If you don't leave, you'll regret this. Zandile's heart pounded. Was Nomsa telling the truth? Or was this another test? Zandile stared at Nomsa, her paws thudding in her ears. What did you say? Nomsa's jaw clenched. She was afraid. Luthando, He's not what you think. You need to leave before it's too late. For weeks, she had trained, fought, and suffered under Luthando's rules. But now a new question burned inside her. Had she walked into a trap? If you know something, Nomsa, just tell me. Nomsa opened her mouth. Then suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed the hall. Both girls froze. Whoever was outside was listening. Pretend we were talking about something else now. The door swung open, and standing there was Luthando Zwide. This was the moment Zandile realized she was trapped between two choices: believe Nomsa or trust Luthando. Luthando stepped inside, his eyes flicking between them. Is there any problem? Zandile's throat went dry. No, we were just talking. For a moment, Luthando said nothing, then he smiled. Good, because talking can be dangerous in the wrong company. In that moment, Zandile understood this was a test, but she didn't know if she had passed or failed. Get dressed, you are coming with me. Where are we going? Luthando didn't answer. He simply walked out, leaving the door open. Zandile knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next would change everything. Luthando didn't speak. Zandile's hands clutched the seat beneath her, her mind racing. What was this? A warning? A punishment? A reward? Finally, the car pulled up to a massive glass skyscraper. She had heard the name before. Everyone had. Luthando Zwide didn't just own wealth, he controlled power itself. Why am I here? Luthando's gaze finally met hers. Because I need to see something. See what? She didn't belong here. She felt it. They knew it. And for the first time, she wondered if Luthando knew it too. But then, they entered a dark room. Luthando gestured for her to sit. Sit! What is this? Luthando took a step closer, his voice softer now. This is where we find out if you were worth saving. Zandile had always been tested, but this was something else. Zandile sat frozen in the chair. What is this? Luthando stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. This is the final test. Zandile had survived the street. She had survived betrayal. She had survived the training. But now she had to prove something greater. Do you know why I picked you? She swallowed, her throat dry. No. For the first time, Luthando's expression softened. Because I saw something in you that you couldn't see in yourself. Sometimes people are chosen for greatness before they even know they are worthy of it. Luthando walked to the other side of the room, pressing a button on the wall. A screen flickered to life. Zandile's breath hitched. You were watching me. I needed to know if you were strong enough. And the truth was, she had already passed the test long before she walked into this room. The screen faded to black. Zandile stirred, her mind racing. So, what now? Luthando turned to her, his gaze sharp but no longer cold. Now you make a choice. A sleek black folder is placed in front of her. The golden letters read, Zwide Empire Executive Development Program. Zandile's heart stopped. This was not just a job. This was power. This was a life she had never even dared to dream of. Work for me, not as a servant, not as a test subject, but as a leader. Why? Why me? Luthando took a step forward, leaning slightly toward her, because the world tried to break you, and you refused to let it. In that moment, she realized she had never been weak. She had never been nothing. She was more than her past. I'm in. She had chosen her path, not as a victim, but as a warrior. Most people never realize their true strength. They let the world tell them who they are. They let rejection define them. They let failure destroy them. But what if I told you that the pain you've been through is not the end of your story? You are not weak. You are not broken. You are being forged. The only question is, will you break or will you rise? The only person who can stop you is you. This is not just a story. This is a blueprint. Thank you.